What happens when a mother stumbles upon a letter her child never meant her to read? The words inside reveal secrets, regrets, and a love that spans years. What happened next left her speechless. Joan Cartwright spent her Saturday mornings in ritual. She woke to the quiet hush of her small house, started the kettle, and wandered to the garden while the water heated. Today, the roses glistened with dew, the air sharp with autumn. Joan clipped a few faded blooms, her thoughts drifting to her daughter, Emily, grown now, living hours away, phone calls dwindling to once a month if she was lucky. The house, once filled with laughter, now echoed only Joan's footsteps and the radio's soft hum. She lingered over her tea, paging through the newspaper, skimming headlines she barely registered. Bills waited on the counter, reminders to change the furnace filter on the fridge. She tidied, as she always did, each corner a memory. Emily's first painted handprint still framed in the hallway, the dents in the kitchen table from years of homework and crafts. Mid-morning, Joan decided to tackle the attic, an annual chore she'd put off all summer. The steep stairs creaked beneath her. Sunlight cut across stacks of boxes, suitcases, and yellowed photo albums. Joan opened trunks one by one, sorting clothes for donation, pausing over a blue velvet dress Emily wore in 3rd grade, a stack of report cards, faded ballet shoes. In a battered cedar chest, Joan found a box labeled Emily, School. Inside were drawings, spelling bee ribbons, and birthday cards. Underneath, she discovered a faded blue folder with Emily's neat printing. Private, do not read. Joan smiled, remembering her daughter's fierce independence. She hesitated, then placed the folder aside, respecting the old boundary. The next box held family letters, holiday cards, postcards from vacations, and Joan's own letters sent to Emily at summer camp, carefully saved and tied with yarn. Joan sat cross-legged, reading through them, nostalgia and regret mingling as she traced the arc of years gone by. In the corner, a small desk, Emily's childhood workspace, stood dust-covered and unused. Joan pulled open the top drawer, finding only pencil stubs and an eraser. The second drawer stuck. She tugged gently, then harder. With a pop, it slid open, revealing a false back she'd never noticed. Behind it, folded neatly, was a single, thick envelope. Joan's hands trembled. The envelope was addressed in Emily's unmistakable script, "To Mom, when you need me most." No stamp, no date. Joan sat back, pulse racing. She traced the writing, heart squeezed tight with memory and curiosity. For a long moment, Joan didn't open it. She let her mind race. Had Emily hidden it during her moody teenage years? After a fight? Or in college, before moving away? The possibilities crowded her mind. She carried the envelope downstairs, set it gently on the kitchen table, and stared at it while making a fresh pot of tea. The house seemed to hold its breath. Joan wiped her hands, sat, and carefully unfolded the letter inside. But before reading, she was interrupted. Her neighbor, Mrs. Connolly, knocked, asking for help with her leaking faucet. Joan tucked the letter into her cardigan pocket, grabbed her toolbox, and followed Mrs. Connolly next door. For the next hour, she worked beneath a sink, tightening pipes and chatting about everything but what mattered most. Back home, Joan made lunch, the letter a weight against her side. She hesitated, distracted by a phone call from her sister, an email about her upcoming church meeting, and a load of laundry to switch. All the while, the envelope called to her, a voice from the past waiting to be heard. Late in the afternoon, sunlight falling low through the windows, Joan finally sat at the kitchen table. She spread the letter before her, hands trembling, and prepared to read her daughter's words, unaware of what memories or revelations might wait inside. Joan sat at the kitchen table, the letter from Emily trembling between her fingers. She glanced around the quiet house, as if anyone might interrupt this private, weighty moment. Taking a deep breath, she slid her nail along the envelope seal, careful not to tear the paper. Inside was several sheets, written in blue ink, the handwriting unmistakably Emily's, slanted and looping, dotted with tiny hearts above each I. She read the salutation, "Dear Mom," and paused, letting her eyes blur, heart pounding with the weight of what she might find. Would it be an apology for an old fight? A confession? A memory meant to comfort? Joan took another breath and began reading. The first page was tender, full of childhood memories. Emily recalled baking cookies together on snow days, the flour on her nose, Joan's laughter echoing in the kitchen. She wrote about the time Joan helped her build a diorama for science class, how her classmates had marveled at the volcano's eruption. Joan smiled at the recollection, seeing Emily's wild curls and flushed cheeks as she jumped up and down, covered in glitter and glue. As Joan read on, the words turned to adolescence, a time marked by slammed doors, icy silences, and fierce love that sometimes looked like anger. Emily wrote of arguments about curfews, homework, and friends Joan never quite trusted. "I know I hurt you," Emily wrote. "I wish I'd found the words to explain how scared I was, how much I wanted you to be proud." Joan felt tears sting her eyes, remembering those endless nights waiting for headlights in the driveway, the relief and exasperation woven together. Midway through the letter, Emily described a time Joan had nearly forgotten, a high school play, when Joan missed opening night because she had to work late. Emily admitted how crushed she'd felt, but also how she cherished the bouquet of daisies left on her pillow afterward, with a note, "You'll always be the star of my show." Joan laughed softly, remembering her frantic dash to the flower shop, her hope that Emily would understand. Outside, the sky darkened, thunder rumbling in the distance. Joan rose to close the windows, clutching the letter. She poured herself more tea, hands shaking, and sat again to read the next page. Emily's tone shifted, growing more reflective. She described her struggles in college, nights spent crying in her dorm, overwhelmed and lonely, wanting to call home but fearing she'd sound weak. She thanked Joan for the care packages, for the notes tucked into boxes of cookies, for the times Joan's voice on the other end of the line had steadied her through panic and doubt. A car horn sounded outside, startling Joan from the memory. She peered out to see Mrs. Connolly's grandson waving as he unloaded groceries. Joan waved back, the ordinary world still spinning outside her window, even as her own life seemed to pause with every word of Emily's letter. By the time Joan finished the last page, the letter felt like a tapestry, woven from sorrow, joy, regret, and gratitude. Emily's closing words trembled in Joan's mind. "If you ever find this, I want you to know I love you. Even when I didn't know how to say it, I needed you. I still do." Joan pressed the letter to her heart, overcome by a flood of memories. Emily as a giggling child, a furious teen, a young woman bravely forging her own path. She sat at the table until darkness crept into the kitchen, the letter spread before her, feeling as if Emily's voice had traveled across years to find her at last. That night, Joan tucked the letter under her pillow and lay awake, hearing Emily's words echo long after the house had grown quiet. Morning broke gray and damp, but Joan woke lighter than she'd felt in months. She carried Emily's letter with her to the kitchen, setting it gently beside her mug as she made breakfast. The words clung to her mind, "I want you to know I love you." They hummed in the background as she buttered toast and watched the neighborhood come alive beyond her window. After breakfast, Joan called Emily's number, hands shaking with a hope that surprised her. The phone rang and rang, then went to voicemail, Emily's familiar recorded greeting, brisk and a little tired. Joan hesitated, then left a simple message. "Morning, Em. Just thinking of you. Call when you have a minute. Love you." She spent the morning moving through the house, her footsteps following old paths, dusting Emily's shelf of trophies, pausing by the window to watch a mother walking her daughter to the bus stop, hand in hand. The ache in Joan's chest was different now, sharper, but threaded through with something gentle. Mid-morning, Mrs. Connolly stopped by, returning the wrench Joan had lent her. She stayed for coffee, chattering about her grandson's new job, the state of the city council, her old aches and pains. Joan listened, nodding, but her mind drifted to Emily, wondering if she'd find the courage to talk about the letter, or if she'd keep it as a silent secret. When Mrs. Connolly left, Joan returned to the attic. She searched through boxes for more pieces of Emily's childhood, yearbooks, old Halloween costumes, a battered backpack covered in patches. She opened each, reliving moments as she sorted what to keep and what to let go. In a tin at the bottom of one box, Joan found another forgotten note, a thank-you card from Emily, written in 3rd grade, full of lopsided hearts and crooked smiles. The mail arrived, mostly bills, a catalog, and a card from her sister inviting her to Sunday dinner. Joan almost declined out of habit, but now she hesitated. Maybe it was time to reconnect with family, to step out of her routine and let herself be cared for. She spent the afternoon in the garden, planting bulbs for spring. The earth was cool and damp, worms wriggling under her trowel. Joan found herself humming the lullaby she used to sing to Emily, the melody carrying across the fence to Mrs. Connolly's open window. When the phone finally rang, Joan rushed to answer. "Hi, Mom," Emily's voice came, weary but warm. Joan's heart skipped. "Emily, sweetheart, I was just thinking of you." They spoke for nearly an hour, about work, weather, an upcoming trip Emily was planning. Joan longed to mention the letter, but held back, sensing Emily's tiredness, not wanting to burden her with unexpected emotion. That night, Joan reread the letter by lamplight. She let herself cry, soft, grateful tears, before carefully folding it back into its envelope. She placed it in her bedside drawer, alongside other treasures, a locket, a photograph, a ticket stub from Emily's first concert. Before bed, Joan sat at her desk and wrote Emily a letter of her own, not knowing if she'd ever send it. She wrote about love that endures, about pride and forgiveness, about the ache and the beauty of watching a child grow up and away. When she finished, she placed her letter atop Emily's, two voices, finally speaking across the silent years. The next few days passed in a gentle flurry. Joan accepted her sister's invitation for Sunday dinner, surprising herself by looking forward to it. She tidied the house with extra care, vacuumed under the sofas, polished the good cutlery, arranged a bouquet of late-season asters for the hall. Emily's letter never left her bedside. Joan read it each morning as if to remind herself that her daughter's love, though distant, still tethered her to something true. On Sunday, Joan baked an apple tart, the kind Emily used to beg for on special occasions. The house filled with warm spice, sunlight spilling through the kitchen window. She wrapped the tart in a towel, packed it in her worn canvas bag, and drove through Golden Leaves to her sister's house across town. Family greeted her at the door, her sister, brother-in-law, two nieces with college news and stories from their busy lives. They fussed over Joan, asked about her garden, pressed her to take seconds at dinner. Joan laughed and joined in, the tension in her shoulders easing as conversation flowed around her like a warm current. At the table, her younger niece, Sophie, mentioned a letter she'd found from her own mother, tucked into a schoolbook. "It made me cry," she said, "but it was good crying." The others shared similar stories, forgotten postcards, scribbled notes tucked into lunch bags, emails sent in moments of worry or pride. Joan listened, silent at first, the secret of Emily's letter warm and bright inside her. After dinner, Joan and her sister lingered over coffee in the quiet kitchen. Her sister asked gently about Emily, wondering if Joan had heard from her recently. Joan nodded, a soft smile on her lips, choosing not to reveal the letter but holding its comfort close. Back home, the evening was quiet. Joan called Emily, leaving a voicemail. "Dinner was lovely. I made your favorite tart. Call when you have a chance." Joan settled on the couch with a photo album, paging through snapshots of birthdays, camping trips, first days of school. She remembered each moment, the sound of Emily's laughter, the stubborn set of her jaw, the way she used to fall asleep on Joan's shoulder during family movies. Later, Joan checked her email and found a short note from Emily. Nothing dramatic, just a simple, "Love you, Mom," and a picture of her dog curled up on the couch. Joan saved the photo, printing it to slip inside the envelope with the letter. That night, sleep came easily. Joan dreamed of walking with Emily through the garden, hand in hand, the air thick with the scent of roses and apple tart. She woke smiling, the ache of years apart softened by the echo of Emily's words, proof that, even unspoken, their love remained. In the days that followed, Joan felt the world open just a little more, a neighbor's invitation for coffee, a note in the mailbox from an old friend, a church potluck announced on the community board. She responded yes more often, letting herself be drawn back into the gentle weave of community. Each night, Joan returned to Emily's letter, reading and rereading, letting its voice join hers in the stillness. The letter became both a memory and a companion, a small miracle, found in a hidden drawer, speaking across the years. Joan woke to sunlight on her face, the start of a new week. She went through her morning rituals, humming a tune as she washed dishes and fed the sparrows on her porch. Emily's letter had become a quiet anchor, a secret reassurance that settled her heart whenever she touched the folded pages in her nightstand drawer. Monday brought a surprise. Emily called mid-morning, her voice warm but tired. "Hey, Mom. I got your voicemail. Sorry I've been so busy. I miss you." Joan's heart leapt. She poured herself coffee and settled in, savoring every detail. Emily's new project at work, her plans for a hiking trip, a funny story about her neighbor's runaway dog. Joan listened, laughed, and offered advice only when asked. As they spoke, Joan realized how much she'd yearned for this easy connection. She didn't mention the letter. Some things, she sensed, were better left for the right moment. Instead, she asked if Emily might visit soon. No pressure, just a gentle invitation. "I'd love that," Emily replied. "Maybe next month." Buoyed by hope, Joan spent the afternoon writing in her journal. She described her garden, the apple tart, and her growing courage to say yes to small invitations. She wrote a new letter to Emily, simple, loving, free of expectation. She slipped it into an envelope, placing it beside the older one. Later that day, Joan joined Mrs. Connolly for coffee and gossip. They laughed about old stories, shared recipes, and swapped advice about bird feeders. Joan noticed how easily she was able to join the world around her, the tightness in her chest eased by the knowledge that love, however complicated, endured. At the church potluck, Joan brought her famous deviled eggs. She chatted with neighbors, welcomed a newly widowed woman to her table, and shared tips on caring for winter roses. Conversation flowed, gentle and unhurried. Joan realized she no longer felt quite so alone, her story, her grief, her hope all woven into the fabric of her community. Throughout the week, Joan found herself reaching for the letter less often, not out of neglect, but because its comfort had become a living presence, not just a written one. She called her sister to plan another dinner, agreed to help organize the library book sale, and signed up to volunteer at the community pantry. One afternoon, as rain tapped the window, Joan reread her most recent letter to Emily. She considered mailing it, but decided to wait. Some words, she thought, were meant to be spoken face to face. She tucked the envelope away, feeling its promise like a seed pressed into the soil, waiting, quietly, for the right time to bloom. That evening, Joan made a simple supper and watched the news. She fell asleep with the window open, the breeze carrying the scent of earth and rain through the house. She dreamed of Emily coming home, arms open, laughter echoing down the hallway. When she woke, Joan smiled, hopeful and steady, ready for whatever the next day would bring. A sudden cold snap brought autumn's end with biting wind and the season's first frost. Joan awoke to white grass and the gentle whir of her furnace kicking on. She wrapped herself in a thick sweater and went about her chores, feeling a flicker of anticipation. Emily had said she might visit soon, and even the chance of it changed the mood in Joan's house. Joan spent the morning sorting through recipes, setting aside cards marked Emily's favorite. She dusted shelves, changed linens in the guest room, and picked out a scarf she thought Emily might like. In the garden, she clipped the last stubborn rosebud, placing it in a glass on the kitchen table. Every small act was a kind of preparation, even if Emily's visit was still only a possibility. Late morning brought a phone call from her sister, inviting Joan to join her and Sophie at a craft fair on Saturday. Joan hesitated. She was tired, and crowds sometimes made her anxious, but then she remembered the lesson of the last few weeks. She said yes. That afternoon, she received an unexpected letter in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar. Inside was a note from a former neighbor, Mrs. Watkins, who'd moved to Florida years ago. Mrs. Watkins had heard about Joan's apple tart at the church potluck and wrote to share a memory. "I still remember Emily singing in the garden, so full of life. I hope you're both well." The memory made Joan smile, her heart pinched with bittersweet joy. At the craft fair, Joan wandered between stalls with her sister and Sophie, sampling spiced cider and admiring handmade quilts. She bought a pair of earrings for Emily, imagining the delight on her daughter's face. They laughed together over old stories, and Joan found herself sharing more about Emily than she usually dared, her quirks, her triumphs, even some of their old arguments. The pain of distance was still there, but softened by the sharing. The weekend ended with Joan at the window, watching dusk settle over the rooftops. The letter from Mrs. Watkins sat beside Emily's on her desk, both a reminder of how voices from the past, written or spoken, could ease the loneliness of the present. That night, Joan called Emily. "Just wanted to say I love you," she said, keeping her voice light. "I love you too, Mom," Emily replied. They spoke longer than usual, swapping stories about the week, Emily promising, again, that she'd try to visit soon. After the call, Joan sat quietly, letting herself feel the fullness of the day, the connections, the memories, the small, persistent hope. She reread both letters, then slipped them into her journal, feeling the healing power of words old and new. Before bed, Joan stood in the garden, her breath clouding in the crisp air. She looked up at the stars and whispered a quiet thanks for love, imperfect, unspoken, but still alive. A week later, Joan's phone rang just as she was folding laundry. Emily's voice was bright, rushed, and a little breathless. "Mom, I've got some time off. Can I come stay this weekend?" Joan's heart leapt. She tried to sound calm, but her hands shook as she replied, "Of course, darling. I'll make up your room." The rest of the week flew by in a blur. Joan shopped for groceries, soup ingredients, Emily's favorite bread, a box of herbal tea. She dusted every corner, rearranged photos on the mantel, and placed Emily's childhood drawing, a lopsided sun with "I love Mom" in wobbly letters, front and center in the hallway. Friday afternoon, Emily arrived in a swirl of wind and autumn leaves, arms full of flowers and a reusable bag. Joan opened the door to her daughter's familiar smile and the warmest hug she'd had in years. They laughed, tripping over suitcases and shoes, moving easily into old rhythms as they unpacked. That evening, the house filled with the scent of soup simmering and bread toasting. Joan and Emily cooked together, catching up in snippets between chopping and stirring. There were stories about work, memories of family pets, and gentle teasing about Joan's ever-growing collection of mugs. After dinner, they sat by the fire, Emily curled on the couch with her feet tucked under Joan's old quilt. They watched an old movie, laughing at the parts they used to quote together. Joan noticed how Emily seemed older now, lines at the corners of her eyes, a thoughtful quiet in her laughter, but still, unmistakably, her child. The next morning brought a walk in the crisp air, scarves fluttering as they wandered through the neighborhood. Joan introduced Emily to Mrs. Connolly, who fussed over her and pressed a jar of homemade jam into her hands. At the bakery, Joan treated them both to cinnamon rolls and coffee. They ate on a bench in the park, geese honking overhead, leaves crunching underfoot. Back home, Emily wandered the house, picking up old trinkets, her science fair ribbon, a chipped mug from college, a photo of her with Joan at the beach. She smiled at some, paused at others, and once Joan saw her slip quietly into her childhood room, closing the door behind her. That evening, Emily found the apple tart Joan had made, just as she had as a girl. They ate dessert at the kitchen table, candlelight flickering between them. Conversation was easy, tender, and, for a moment, Joan felt the years slip away. Later, Emily lingered in the doorway before bed. "Thanks, Mom. For everything." Joan simply nodded, her heart full, the letter upstairs waiting, its words echoed in every moment of their weekend together. That night, Joan slept deeply, content in the knowledge that, for now, love and presence were enough. Sunday dawned golden and brisk. Joan woke to the sound of Emily humming in the kitchen, making coffee as sunlight spilled across the table. They ate breakfast together, toast with jam for Mrs. Connolly, soft-boiled eggs, the last slices of apple tart, moving easily through conversation, sharing memories and plans. Afterward, they took their mugs into the garden, walking among the fading roses and turning earth in the small beds. Emily asked about Joan's neighbors, the community center, the books she was reading. Joan, emboldened by the warmth of the weekend, spoke honestly about her days, her hopes, and the loneliness she sometimes felt. The easy exchange made Joan's heart ache with gratitude. When Emily returned inside, she paused by the hallway table, fingers tracing the framed drawing from childhood. Joan watched her, heart full, words crowding at the edge of her lips. Upstairs, in her nightstand, the letter waited, a secret bridge spanning years of silence. Joan hesitated, uncertain if the time was right to share it, or if the gift of this visit was enough. Midday brought packing and a flurry of small tasks, folding laundry, gathering leftovers, searching for Emily's misplaced gloves. Joan pressed a bag of apples and the earrings from the craft fair into Emily's hands, insisting she take them. Emily laughed, hugging Joan tight, her eyes shining. At the door, they embraced for a long moment, neither wanting to let go. "Come back soon," Joan said softly. "I will," Emily promised, her voice steady. She stepped into the cool air, waving until Joan could no longer see her car at the end of the street. The house settled into quiet. Joan wandered through the rooms, feeling their new warmth, touched by laughter and presence. She made tea and sat at the kitchen table, running her fingers over the envelope in her pocket. That night, Joan wrote a new letter to Emily. She wrote about their weekend, the joy and comfort, the power of small moments. She wrote that she was proud, grateful, and unafraid to say, "I love you now," out loud and often. She placed the new letter beside the old one, letting them rest together in her drawer, a record of love both spoken and unspoken. Joan went to bed, the scent of apples and autumn in the air, heart at ease. The house was quiet, but no longer empty. She knew, with a certainty as steady as sunrise, that some words didn't need to be read to be true, they only needed to be lived every single day.